Sushant Sareen first. Last time there was an anti-India pro-Khalistan protest. I'm told that there were thousands of people who came out in the streets of Vancouver, Toronto, Ottawa. When there was a similar protest yesterday, late at night in India, very few people came out. Now this is being suggested that maybe because we've taken belated action against Nijar, against Pannu, a message seems to have gone home that it cannot be business as usual, that you need to be careful about what you say and do. Do you think that's true, or do you think this is just very, very ephemeral?
I would imagine that there is some truth in that, Rahul, that these kind of actions have consequences. Look, if there are people who are venting their anger at whatever misplaced anger they might have against India, they're entitled to do that. I might be offended if they burn the national flag, but in the countries where they are, maybe that's allowed. Okay, I don't have a problem. It's the violence bit which they threaten. It's the fact that many of these guys or the ringleaders of these thugs are involved in criminal activity in Punjab, and all of that is condoned. And it's simply ignored in Canada, and that is what is the really galling part of this entire thing. Just a mere protest is fine, but then threats are issued, calls for Hindu genocide are made in Canada. How is that freedom of speech and freedom of conscience? Imagine somebody was doing this sitting in Canada about Jews. How do you think that would work out? So clearly the Indian government had to deliver a very strong message, and the normal diplomatic tools that we were using till now with, for example, Britain or with the Canadians or even with the Americans to some extent. Can you imagine that people firebomb your consulate in San Francisco? Okay, San Francisco has a terrible law and order situation anyways, right? There is no law and order left in that city. But even then, protecting a diplomatic establishment is the host government's responsibility. In London, you assault an Indian High Commission. In Canada, you literally, there have been instances where Indian diplomats were nearly about to be assaulted. You have put a target on their backs, and the Canadian authorities do absolutely nothing. Now, surely the Indian government had to start cracking the whip.
No, but why so late? That's the question, Manjinder Sirsai. Why did it take Justin Trudeau's comments inside the House of Commons for the Indian government to start acting against Guru Patwant Pannu? Given his actions, given that he's been asking for our diplomats to be killed, given that he's asking for Hindus to be attacked and thrown out of...
I am not getting your voice. If the question is for me, I'm not getting your voice. Please, you need to get sorted out.
Okay, give me a moment. I'll try and fix that connection with Manjinder Sirsai. In the meanwhile, let me go across to the representative from the Shiromani Gurdwara Prabandhak Committee who's joining us on this broadcast, Kiranjit Kaur. Kiranjot ji, do you think the lackadaisical turnout at the protest in Canada yesterday is because a very stern message has been served? You can't talk about killing Indian diplomats or a genocide against Hindus and think that there will be no consequence. Is that why you think that very few people decided to show up at that Khalistani protest yesterday?
Your voice is dragging. I can't really hear what you are saying. Could you please repeat the question?
My question, ma'am, was, do you think it's because stern action has been taken against the likes of Gurpatwant Pannu, his property being confiscated in Amritsar and in Chandigarh, action against Nijar and his associates? Is that why people didn't show up in large numbers at the protests in Ottawa and in Toronto, because they've understood that if there are actions, there will be consequences?
So whatever is happening is in Canada is for the Canadian Sikhs to see what they are doing, and for the demands that they are raising, what they want to do, that is up to the Canadian Sikhs. How can we answer for them?
Do you think the action should have been taken earlier against those who very openly are calling for arms to be picked up, for Indian diplomats to be murdered, for Hindus to be chased away? Do you call for action? Because the SGPC so far has been rather ambivalent in its comments on the anti-India activities in Canada.
See, you have to see the background from where it is all coming. See, this is a fallout of the time we saw that in 80s. From that time, Sikhs from Canada started immigrating to, Sikhs from India started immigrating to Canada. There were issues in Punjab, and those issues have not been addressed till today. So there's a kind of resentment within the community. However, that does not mean that we target any community. We do not agree with the statement of no communal problem. I have seen now, after a long time, that the Hindu and Sikh families are getting their children married into each other's families. So the communalism in Punjab is missing. This kind of message targeting Hindus in Canada is something that finds no root in Punjab at all. And we do not accept it at all. Rather, we condemn it.
It's very heartening to see that being in the SGPC, you're taking a strong position, which is very important, because you can't have calls for genocide, for Hindus to be chased away from Canada. This is not in keeping with the Sikh religious ethos, values and culture at all. Daniel Bodman at the National Telegraph in Toronto, how is this story playing out in Canada at this moment? We're seeing the Trudeau government run into one embarrassment after another, particularly with the Nazi from Ukraine being felicitated inside Parliament. Have they realized that they've opened a can of worms and probably earned India's ire for a long time, or is Trudeau still aiming to bash on regardless?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Trudeau would learn his lesson here. That doesn't seem to be part of his MO. We have the thing where they invite a literal SS Nazi, not just a standard, I joined the German army because, you know, geopolitical things, I was in Ukraine, the Soviets are bad. The literal SS, like the hardline ideological, carried out the Holocaust, you know, there to kill ethnic minorities, SS. That's bad, right? So I can understand India's point of view. How are we supposed to take the Canadian government seriously and their top super secret report that can't be said when we're a country that can't spend 30 seconds to figure out what side of the war a man fought on before we give him a standing ovation? Well, the Ukrainian prime minister is visiting. It's insane. So the level of monumental incompetence is not going to project well on the international stage. Now, if you're asking how does this play out in Canada, well, welcome to Canada since 2015. Trudeau does something monumentally stupid, like start a diplomatic war with India, an ally with, you know, no evidence to go, you know, that would convince anyone. But what's this conversation in Canada now? We've hit 1 week and he's done something new that is so monumentally stupid and incompetent and crazy that it's now shifted to this new controversy. So I'm not sure if Canada will ever get back onto India because, you know, October 1st, we don't know what Trudeau's going to pull. Like, we don't know if he's going to literally join ISIS or something. Like, you just don't know what the Trudeau government's going to do. So the focus in Canada is now shifted to how did we honor a literal neo-Nazi? How come Justin Trudeau won't take responsibility? He's gaslighting the entire country. We all saw it. You saw the clapping. We saw the clapping. You know who invited them. We know who invited them. Justin Trudeau has the audacity to get up in front of the world and say that don't fall for Russian disinformation. Yes, Vladimir Putin was the one who created this whole thing. Like, it's insane. So the gaslighting, the lying, the incompetence, it's all the hallmarks of a Justin Trudeau scandal. And now the conversation in Canada has shifted from Justin Trudeau so incompetent, how did he mess up relationship with India, to, oh my God, Justin Trudeau so incompetent, how did he mess up our relationship with Ukraine and all that? Well, now Poland's coming after us because he likes taking shots at our allies like Poland and Italy and India for not being socially progressive enough for him. So now the Polish are mad at us and they're taking shots at us diplomatically by demanding the extradition of this Nazi that we honored in Parliament. So it's a disaster. It's an absolute disaster for the Liberals, but it's been a cascading disaster since 2015. And they're in a coalition with the NDP. There's nothing we can really do to force them out. There's a cult of personality within a lot of the media and some academia that will just take anything he says at face value and then push that narrative out there so he can sort of survive being popular within 20% of the population and then go on a global tour when he's done of a world citizen, UN friend, whatever. So this
But what this has done really, Michael Rubin, is in a way typifies the incompetence of the Canadian administration, the poor check of their background controls, to not know that a Nazi is being felicitated on the floor of Parliament is just downright embarrassing, and it is to the point that the likes of Manjinder Sirsa will make, that you aren't checking the backgrounds of these Khalistani terrorists. These aren't regular religious scholars, even though they run gurdwaras. In that garb, they're running a very dangerous illegal immigration gangster racket, which you seem to be completely oblivious to.
Well, you're absolutely right, Rahul, and Daniel was absolutely right in what he said. Aside from the United States concluding that perhaps Canada has the best armed plumbers out there when pictures show them with AK-47s, what this reminds me of is the scandal after the 9/11 terrorist attacks, when we learned just how many warning signs the FBI missed. When you had Al-Qaeda terrorists coming to the United States, learning how to take off in airplanes, but showing no interest in landing. If you look at Nijar's immigration history to Canada, the false passport, the fake marriage, everything along the line, the pictures of him with AK-47s, what you see is a scandal within the Canadian security services about how this happened. You know, India may be furious at what's happened over the last 9 days, but what we're really seeing is taking the lid off a scandal, which is years in the making, and indeed goes back to Pierre Trudeau's administration with the soft handling of the Khalistani terrorists.